Moon's military is ready to strike first.
North Korea could detonate yet another nuclear device.
This is something they've been prepping for decades. I'm absolutely terrified. They have no allegiance to anyone. The scariest part is there are 100 to 200,000 people in concentration camps in North Korea right now. So if there's an attack, we might be looking at genocide within one day.
Vice President Mike Pence is heading to the front line of the standoff with North Korea.
Mr. Trump has said is the policy. We will not stand by and allow for the North Koreans to behave badly.
Breaking news from law enforcement officials. They say they have caught a man accused of stealing 18 guns and sending a manifesto to President Trump.
Joseph Jakubowski was detained without incident this morning at a campsite about 160 miles west of Milwaukee.
ISIS fighters were killed when the United States dropped the mother of all bombs on an ISIS cave complex in Afghanistan.
This was the appropriate weapon to use at this time.
It's not necessarily a change in rules of engagement. It's a change in perspective. It's a change of intent.
North Korea saw this happen. Russia saw this happen. And even the fighters there in Afghanistan, the ones that weren't decimated, some of them could probably throw their guns down and leave.
Right, it's actually happening, but this is April 15th, the dreaded day for many Americans. But what's more exciting is John Scott's on the couch.
In the house this morning.
Love it.
We are so excited to have you, John.
It is. It's great to be here, but you know, we don't do food on Happening Now. And you guys have such a spread out there. It's true. It smells so good, and I am dying of hunger.
Just wait until you see Pete eat it all.
Well, we'll have an eating contest maybe, potentially. All I do is eat on the show. It's how I have breakfast.
Ribs, you said today.
What? Ribs out there today? Barbecue? We're going to help you relax on tax day, not be stressed. But, John, I saw you in the hallway, and I thought, is it 11 o'clock on Monday? Is it happening? No, it's not. It's 5 o'clock on Saturday. We're ready to go.
I do work.
We're excited to have you.
And we've got a lot of news to get to this morning, starting with North Korea.
Yeah, that's right. We start with a Fox News alert. The world is watching North Korea this morning as tensions reach a boiling point with the United States.
Kim Jong-un showing off its country's military arsenal and maybe on the verge of another nuclear test.
Griff Jenkins is live from Washington, D.C. He has the very latest for us now. Griff?
Good morning, John, Pete, and Abby. It is truly an understatement to say that tensions are running high on the Korean Peninsula today. A massive show of force as North Korea paraded what looks to be intercontinental ballistic missiles, among other heavy weapons, during its annual celebration honoring the country's founder, Kim Il-sung, as the world watches cautiously in anticipation of North Korea's 6th nuclear test. The message out of Pyongyang is clear. They're ready for war. North Korea's vice foreign minister on Friday saying they are prepared.
We are taking into account the most aggressive and dangerous option that the U.S. might come up with. We'll go to war if they choose.
The foreign minister also saying that North Korea views the Trump administration as much more vicious and aggressive than the Obama administration. This comes as Vice President Mike Pence travels to South Korea this weekend to reassure our ally in the face of these rising tensions, discussing, among other things, how the U.S. will respond should North Korea conduct that nuclear test. And China now reacting to the ratcheting up of the North Korean provocations. China's foreign minister warning that, quote, storm clouds are gathering, and that if war breaks out, then no one wins in that situation. But how President Trump will respond in the face of that test is anybody's guess. The USS Carl Vinson is positioned off the Korean Peninsula and clearly capable of missile strikes if necessary. And reports of a preemptive strike by the U.S. were shot down aggressively by Pentagon officials yesterday. So we wait and watch on this Easter weekend to see if provocations and these tensions rise even more. Not only could we face a test, guys, of the nuclear test, is also whether they'll test missiles like we saw in that parade.
That's right. Griff Jenkins. Griff, thanks a lot for that update.
Griff.
Appreciate it. You know, this is the most important day on North Korean calendar. It's called the Day of the Sun, as he said, the birthday of the founder of that country.
105 years.
105 years. They always have these parades marching missiles down the middle. Sometimes we don't know if they're real or fake, but it's all this chest beating of the regime, which they've used over time, many, many decades, to build up a nuclear arsenal. They weren't supposed to have one. They've got one.
Yeah.
And how unfortunate that Easter weekend, of course, has to coincide with their celebration of the Day of the Sun.
Yeah.
That's right.
And another huge test for President Trump when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, you think about the past 2 weeks and what he has been really asked to do to handle these situations, and he's saying we are going all in. This is going to be very different from the past 8 years. We're going to lead from the front.
That's right. It's America first mixed with American leadership. What does it look like? And the propaganda of North Korea will say, oh, he's reckless and unpredictable. He's not predictable. He's also shown a willingness to use military force, whether it's the chemical weapons, the attack for chemical weapons in Syria, or the mother of all bombs in Afghanistan. But this is a different approach. It's brinksmanship. It's a willingness to say that we will use military force if necessary, which changes the calculation of North Korea. Because what we've done so far in North Korea hasn't worked. In fact, the 5 previous nuclear tests, and I think we have a full screen of the 5 previous tests that North Korea has done and how the U.S. has responded. So in 2006, the first one, U.S. blocks military equipment and exports. There's sanctions there. In 2009, a lot of talk, labels it a grave threat, but no embargo. January of 2016, you can see it really ramps up in 2016. Law passing sanctions, and then there's 2 more in, there's 2013. We moved some defense equipment, missile shields, and then in September of 2016, we pushed for more sanctions. So a lot of sanctions, a lot of talk, UN resolutions, but their march to a nuclear bomb continues.
Yeah.
And of course, the upsetting thing is the fact that North Korea is so tightly allied with Iran. I mean, you can't think of 2 worse actors on the world stage right now. But whatever technology North Korea manages to put together is quickly going to be in the Iranian arsenal.
Which is even more frightening. Interesting timing, though, for Mike Pence, the vice president, to be traveling over to South Korea today to be there tomorrow. I mean, I think that's a very smart move. We had Ambassador John Bolton. He was on Fox News yesterday, and he said it is so important when it comes to North Korea to act now. Here's what he said.
We don't have much time, and one of the reasons that we're, I think, so pressed now is after 8 years of the Obama policy of strategic patience, which is really a synonym for doing nothing, North Korea's capabilities worldwide are much greater. And let me just add one other point. When North Korea gets the capability to drop an ICBM with a nuclear warhead on the United States, Iran will have it the next day for the right price.
So they've got a couple dozen nuclear weapons. They're developing the ability to deliver that payload in intercontinental ballistic missiles to our shores, which makes it a very real threat to us. And, John, you mentioned Iran. What a lesson North Korea is on Iran. North Korea, we brokered this deal in 1994. President Clinton, we were supposed to get rid of all their nuclear weapons, some sanctions relieved. Here we are 2 decades later. They're armed and ready to go. Why do we believe that in Iran it would be any different? It's a sobering lesson.
And they are so unpredictable and mercurial.
Yes.
Kim Jong-un does not seem to be a stable individual, and he talks about President Trump being so
that's right,
belligerent, but this guy, you don't know how he's going to react.
That's why we're watching today very closely, because you just don't know how things are going to play out. I think the most important player in all of this, though, is China when it comes to North Korea, because they really pull the strings in terms of what they are capable of doing and not. So there was a call on Wednesday night with President Trump and President Xi of China after their trip they had together at Mar-a-Lago. I think that really says a lot about this relationship that really we haven't seen for a very long time. And I think he said, the President Xi said, I want to work with you to denuclearize North Korea. If that is the case and they end up ultimately following through on that, that would be a game changer in this whole thing.
It's a big development after decades of futility on this issue. To get China to do that shows that, hey, maybe President Trump knows what he's doing when it comes to the international scene. Speaking of knowing what we're doing, our military, we're got an update in Afghanistan. You heard about the mother of all bombs dropped in Nangarhar province against an ISIS compound. Well, we originally reported that 36 ISIS fighters were dead. This morning we're learning up to 90 ISIS fighters were killed in the usage of that bomb. So a threefold increase in the amount of ISIS fighters killed in that strike. Turns out it was a hub and a headquarters and a network, and still 0 civilian casualties. General Jack Keane was on the program, was on the channel last night on Hannity. This is what he had to say about the strike. Take a listen.
Recall, 3 Secretary of Defenses all had challenges with President Obama in the execution of their duties. Secretary Gates, Secretary Panetta, and Secretary Hagel was fired over it. The issues were the same, micromanaging the military. What President Trump has said, listen, when we're involved in conflict operations in Iraq, in Afghanistan, other places where we're already there, already committed, what you do with your forces are your decisions. The result of that, Kimberly, is that we actually make better decisions, and the fact is the forces are more effective because they can adapt to an enemy that is changing as the days go by. And when you're able to do that and you don't have to ask permission, we're very responsive in getting on top of that enemy.
So what he's talking about there is President Trump giving the generals really all the say when it comes to defeating ISIS and combating terrorism, that they're the ones that are on the front lines. They have seen this for years now. They know what to do over there. They know how to act. And so he trusts them.
No more second guessing,
right,
as we saw for 8 years, really, during the Obama administration. The President Obama felt that the use of force was not appropriate in so many circumstances.
That's right, and no more micromanaging from 30-something, grad students in the White House in skinny ties telling commanders on the ground seriously when they should pick targets and what to hit for political calculations. Generals on the battlefield want to win wars and defeat our enemies. Good riddance to these 90 scumbags in Afghanistan from ISIS, and it's a wonderful thing when our military is successful in a mission like this. We should celebrate it. And 0 civilian casualties. It doesn't mean the problem is solved in Afghanistan. We've still got a lot of room there to go. The Taliban still is resurgent, unfortunately. But ISIS should be hit wherever they are, and that's exactly what our commanders did in
Whenever they are in safe havens, I mean, ISIS is out to hit the West.
Yep.
They're out to kill innocent civilians. We should take opportunity of that whenever we have the chance.
How about some headlines?
I think we've got some other headlines to get to this morning.
There's
Thank
a few
you, John.
other things going on.
Let me bring you some other headlines this morning, starting with a panic at New York's Penn Station when Amtrak police tasked an unruly man and passengers mistook the noise as gunfire.
People started screaming, gun, gun, and just hundreds of people started trampling other people.
A man was tased while people frantically running for the door in a stampede, leaving a trail of debris and abandoned luggage. About a dozen people were hurt. All that commotion made worse because of a power outage earlier in the evening that packed the station with stranded passengers. Well, new legal obstacles are forcing the executions of 7 murderers to be put on hold. Lawyers arguing Arkansas's rush is unconstitutional and reckless. The state has not carried out a death sentence in 12 years, but wanted to beat the expiration date on its batch of one of the drugs used in the legal injection. And tech nerds, the U.S. Army wants you. The Pentagon stepping up its fight against ISIS extremists, assembling a growing force of cyber experts to defeat the terror group. Military services looking to incorporate cyber technology into its daily fight, including new ways to disrupt the enemy's communications, recruiting, fundraising, and propaganda.
Paging millennials in their parents' basement to play video games. You could help the government.
And American workers paying out a record number of federal taxes, with the U.S. Treasury collecting more than $1.5 trillion for the first half of the fiscal year 2017. Almost half of the money came from individual income taxes, totaling $695 billion. Wow. But according to the Treasury Department, the Fed still ran a $527 billion deficit during that time.
The more they take in, the more they spend. That's right.
That's
a basic principle.
Of money.
Indeed. All right.
Well, President Trump spending Easter Sunday at Mar-a-Lago, and the outrage from his opponents is deafening.
How dare he?
Were they this critical of President Obama's weekend plans? We have more on that ahead as Fox and Friends rolls on.
That's right, and that's not all they're angry about. Remember when we evaporated nearly 100 terrorists in Afghanistan? The people who want to kill us? Well, apparently that's offensive if you celebrate the death of ISIS terrorists. Dakota Meyer awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama. He's got some thoughts about that, and he'll be coming up soon. We weren't born. As the standoff between North Korea and the United States comes to a head. Pyongyang threatening war, even the possibility of a cyber attack that could wipe out or a missile attack that could wipe out our electrical grid if we don't back down. Here to react is David Bellavia, U.S. Army veteran, Silver Star recipient, and author of House to House. David, thank you very much for joining us this morning. So first of all, take us inside this regime just for a second. The nature of what Kim Jong-un has surrounded himself with and what they're threatening the United States with.
Well, thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. You know, this is a leader who's a very paranoid guy. Majority of his population starving. He's importing French cheese. You know, eats so much of it he has trouble walking. I mean, this is an unstable man. It's an unstable regime. And they have been able, for 3 presidents now, to use the diplomacy and leverage of essentially having the threat of an ICBM and getting what they want. We have a president in Donald Trump who acknowledges that that's no longer going to be acceptable. And, you know, when you talk about an ICBM blowing up. You know, for years and years, the Americans saw North Koreans' missile technology, and in the 60s, we didn't even want to talk about this phenomenon of electromagnetic pulse because we were afraid that we would expose our vulnerabilities of our electric grid to the Soviets. Now, fast forward to the present time, you look at these videos of some of these nations that are testing their solid fuel rockets, and they blow up in the sky, and sometimes people think that those are failed launches because they're not able to get into the stratosphere. The reality is they're actually practicing like they did in 2013 for an EMP blast in the atmosphere to take out the American power grid.
So, David, some people are saying, hey, this is just on the Korean Peninsula. Why do we care? Why should an American care? Tell us why an American today, besides allies in the region, which we care about, why should they care about whether North Korea has nuclear capabilities and the ability to deliver it?
Well, one of the biggest problems with North Korea is that they don't have a lot of money and they don't have a lot of partners in the world outside of China. So when you develop technology, that is going to go to the ISIS eBay as soon as it's out there and they can get some money for it. The other problem is a couple of years back, President Obama allowed North Korea to put a space satellite into orbit. I don't know what technology they have that they need to have it beamed down to Pyongyang, but the reality is that a real satellite? There's a lot of threat and a lot of speculation out there that could be something other than a satellite. It could have a device on it. It could just be a bowling ball meant to knock out our satellites. So this is a regime that's unstable. They're dangerous, but they're also desperate, and their back is against the wall. And it's great to have a president that could stare them down in the eyes and say, you know what, your behavior is unacceptable and it won't be tolerated anymore.
Well, brinksmanship indeed, but it's dangerous. We've seen before in history what happens when we don't take seriously the words of a leader when they say they want to strike us. David Bellavia, thanks for your expertise this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, there was celebration in the streets after Navy SEALs took out Osama bin Laden.
USA! Patriotism worn on their sleeves.
So, why aren't Americans allowed to celebrate our latest feat, evaporating nearly 100 ISIS terrorists in Afghanistan with 0 civilian casualties? Well, Dakota Meyer, awarded the Medal of Honor by President Obama, has some thoughts on that. And President Trump promised to crack down on sanctuary cities like San Francisco. And what better way to prove that it's working than to watch the left's pathetic attempts to fight back? That's next. Headlines. For the first time since Ronald Reagan in 1983, President Trump will speak at the National Rifle Association's annual convention. A spokesman for the NRA says, quote, "We're excited to once again have a president who respects the Second Amendment." That event is scheduled for April 28th in Atlanta. And Sean Spicer taking a break from his day job as the White House press secretary to report for duty at the Pentagon for the Navy Reserves. As many of you may not know, Spicer, seen here in an undated photo, joined the Navy Reserve 20 years ago and currently holds the rank of commander, serving in multiple ways. Very cool.
I love that. Important facts that we just don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Pete. Well, after the U.S. military killed Osama bin Laden, there was celebration in the streets.
USA! Patriotism worn on their sleeves.
But after the U.S. launched the mother of all bombs and killed almost 100 ISIS terrorists in Afghanistan, there were few cheers. And instead, there was talk that it was too, quote, aggressive.
What do you think about that? Let's talk with Dakota Meyer, a Marine Corps veteran, a Medal of Honor recipient who fought in Afghanistan, not far from where that Moab bomb was dropped. He joins us now. Dakota, your thoughts when you first heard what was going on there, the use of this bomb, the first time ever in war?
I mean, look, I think that it's great that we're finally doing it. I think it shows that it's a direct reflection of leadership, right? I mean, I think it finally shows that we have an administration that's letting the military do its job. I mean, this region is unforgiving terrain. I mean, you know, it's not like it's a city. It's not like it's a, you know, it's not like there's a, it's unforgiving terrain. It's some of the hardest terrain that I've ever seen in the world. And that's what makes them so successful, and that's why they put obviously their headquarters there, because it is hard to kill. I mean, you take one bomb drop, and it kills 90 of them, I mean, listen, that's a success any day in my book.
Absolutely. You know, Dakota, to step back, some people are criticizing, saying, well, we shouldn't celebrate this. Of course, war is difficult. No one celebrates war. But if we can't pat ourselves on the back or our operators or others on the back for killing 90 ISIS terrorists, then what can we, in the context of war, be grateful for?
I mean, look, I think that's the exact point of it, right? I mean, we're a team. I mean, we're a team. I mean, look, the U.S. military is America's team. And why can we not celebrate a win on behalf of them? Why do we not celebrate all of it? I mean, you think it doesn't make us as service members feel good and empower us to want to go out and do better things? I mean, how does it make you feel when you celebrate for a team and that team sees that their fans are cheering them on? I mean, it's the same way with the American military.
Yeah,
Dakota, you have seen firsthand what these terrorists are capable of. You've been there on the front lines. What does this do to the mindset of these terrorists? And also, what does it do to the mindset of our military that are out there fighting against them?
Well, I mean, look, the mindset of these terrorists, I mean, look, there's only one solution to them as the problem, and that's exactly more of this happening. But, you know, for the U.S. military, I mean, I think you take a year ago, we had a commander-in-chief that would let you get captured by Iran and not do any repercussions. I mean, what do you think the mindset is there? Versus now, we've got a commander-in-chief that's saying, hey, run your military like you need to and do whatever it takes to get rid of the enemy.
Yeah, Dakota, what does it mean when you're on the ground to be able to make those decisions? Because President Trump has pushed decision-making down to commanders. You know, at the local level, you made a lot of decisions that earned you the Medal of Honor. If you had to call up and report and ask permission every time, it causes delays. So how big of a change is it when you push decision-making down to the lower level?
Well, I mean, it's huge. I mean, it's huge. I mean, you take the battle that I was in. We lost guys because of the reason that they were so worried about collateral damage, right? I mean, I'll never forget hearing that the village was shooting at us. And finally, we've got someone who's coming in and saying, hey, run the military like it needs to be. And you have, you know, instead of worrying about politics and the court of public opinion, hey, do whatever needs to be done in order to be successful.
All right, Dakota Meyer, good to have you here, getting your perspective.
The home team is such a great point. Dakota, thanks a lot.
It is. We're the home team.
You got it.
Well, North Korea is threatening war with the United States in a fight that could have nuclear consequences. Our intel panel is here to weigh in on the president's options to keep America safe and keep North Korea.
The problem will be taken care of. I will say this. I think China has really been working very hard.
President Trump, they're taking a hard stance as tensions with one of our greatest enemies rise to alarming levels. North Korea showing off a flight of new missiles at its annual Day of the Sun military parade earlier today, including 2 that could be intercontinental missiles. So what are the president's options when it comes to this growing threat? Here to discuss, former CIA officer Brian Dean Wright, former Army Intel officer Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, and national security analyst for the Clarion Project, Ryan Morrow. Thanks, each of you, for being with us. Tony, there have been 5 nuclear tests from North Korea before. We expect there could be another one this weekend.
Right.
Not much has happened after the 5 previous tests, frankly. How should the U.S. respond this time, if it happens?
Well, look, we had to break a pattern. I was there in 1994 when we first started down this path of trying to get the North Koreans off that. And let me tell you, John, in 94, there was a heightened set of tensions just like now. I mean, when I was in Seoul, I was actually contemplating how I would get out of the country should we go to war. So we have to understand that this has been going on a long time. So I think what's notable here is that President Trump is finally talking about breaking out of this pattern of allowing the North Koreans to do things like build their nuclear arsenal, do tests, and actually get rewarded for the bad behavior. So I think this is the key here, is that if there's another nuclear test, I think the results of this event will not be more rewards. I think Mr. Trump will do things to make them pay a price, and that's going to become an issue that we have to discuss.
Brian, it is always said that China is the key. The president seems to feel that he has China's backing this time.
Yeah, and that is a huge, huge change. You see, for many years, you know, that the world has passed a variety of different sanctions, and everyone has known that the only reason that they would be successful is if China actually did something about it. To date, they never have. And what you're seeing is President Trump saying, all right, I'm going to force their hand. Why? Because we know that the Chinese want stability over all things. And if we start making that region a bit unstable, that will force the Chinese to act, and that's why you're seeing them do the things that they're doing now, like withhold withholding coal shipments and so forth. You're going to see a lot more action when President Trump does these shows of force backed up by things like the strike in Syria.
President Trump has said he wants to be unpredictable. He does not want to telegraph his next move. Ryan, tell us how that plays into the Korean mindset here.
Well, look, Trump always called himself a counterpuncher, and now what you are seeing is the arrival of a counterpunching foreign policy. So the problem that he now has is that if he fails to counterpunch this time, then it looks like we back down and our credibility is injured because of that. So some options that Trump, I think, should exercise is declassify the information that links the Iranian nuclear program to the North Korean program so people see them as one entity, and also announce measures to reach the North Korean people so that the regime realizes that the information blockade and the cultish environment that sustains the regime is coming to an end.
You're all on camera at this moment, so I want a show of hands. How many of you expect a nuclear test today?
Within the next few weeks, let's say that.
All right.
Few weeks.
All right. So within the next few weeks. And the response, Tony, what should it be?
Well, first, as stipulated, I think the Chinese have to take a very serious look at what they do. I think we have options. Let me be clear, so we not to say anything I'm not supposed to. We have options to do things against their program. We've been planning these things, John, since the 90s. The question becomes, will there be political will by this president to do something about it? This may not be necessary by the fact that the Chinese may well decide, hey, we don't want to see the North Koreans do something to provoke the United States. This is a big game of poker, and the stakes are very high, but it's a game that's been going on a long time, and we've always not been playing the strong hand we have, and this is where we're at.
It'll be fascinating to see what happens this weekend and maybe in the next couple of weeks, as you all suggest. Tony Shaffer, Brian Dean Wright, Ryan Morrow, thanks for your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, to some headlines now. This morning, new proof that President Trump's crackdown on sanctuary cities is working. San Francisco filing a lawsuit claiming it's on track to lose $2 billion in federal funding. It's also asking a judge to overturn the executive order signed by President Trump. The Justice Department firing back in an interview with Judge Janine set to air later tonight.
We've got to keep the pressure up. We're going to look at these grant programs. If you're not cooperating with the federal government, you're going to lose grant money. We're going to battle on them every step of the way. We're going to put pressure on these cities, and it's just important for America and the people.
And United Airlines adding insult to injury after dragging a passenger off an overbooked plane, causing some global outrage.
No, this is wrong. Oh, my God. Look at what you did to him. Oh, my God.
A story that will not end. We are now learning that the airline did not send Dr. David Dow's luggage with him. Instead, it shipped his bags to his practice in Kentucky, leaving him with nothing as he recovered from his injuries in a Chicago hospital. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong in that moment went wrong.
Yeah, that's
unreal.
That's rough. That's, as you said, this story that never ends. We'll see. We'll keep bringing it to you. Well, American forces just wiped out close to 100 ISIS terrorists, and the media is slamming the president for being in Mar-a-Lago.
It is a place where people who don't have any credentials necessarily, other than the fact that they're a member of the country club, can be roaming the property while Donald Trump is there.
Quick headlines for you on this Saturday morning. A community college in New York now laying off its entire cafeteria staff, replacing them with self-serve kiosks. School officials say they were forced to let them go because the lunch ladies, well, helped bring about a $150,000 deficit in food service operations. This, despite New York lawmakers now allowing middle-class families to attend public colleges for free. And a lunch lady loses her job for feeding the poor. Some kids asked for more food after eating their lunch. Cafeteria worker Debbie Solzman gave them another serving and was then summarily fired from the Ohio school district. She says she would do it again because some of them could not afford basic meals. The school district claims she was fired for failure to account for food sales and providing food without payment to her grandchildren. So there you go.
Ooh,
some headlines for you on this Saturday.
Thank you, John. All right, well, even though American forces killed 36 ISIS terrorists in Afghanistan, some in the media are slamming the president for being at Mar-a-Lago this weekend.
It is a place where people who don't have any credentials necessarily other than the fact that they're a member of the country club can be roaming the property while Donald Trump is there dealing with world crises.
We know that this is actually his 17th trip to one of his golf courses since he took the presidency.
This will be his 7th trip. Count him 7 times he's gone to that Florida compound since his inauguration.
In the 8 years of his presidency, Barack Obama's total travel costs were at least $97 million. At the current rate, the cost of President Trump's travel could well exceed that.
Breathlessly emphasizing those numbers, of course. But the president is hardly the first commander-in-chief to deal with crisis or do some historic work away from the White House.
Here with more is senior editor for The Federalist and Fox News contributor Molly Hemingway. Molly, good to see you as always.
Great to see you.
All right, let's just go through the list here of some of the presidents that have, heaven forbid, done some work outside of the White House. Here is Reagan at the Western White House. He signed the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981, hosted the likes of Margaret Thatcher, Queen Elizabeth.